The Germans had successfully deployed one of the first battlefield rocket systems, the Nebelwerfer, from 1940 onwards. The name meant smoke mortar, and the system was originally developed in secret in the 1930s. The Nebelwerfer would be towed into position, each weapon having 6 barrels, firing the 30-centimeter explosive missile, with about a 5-kilometer range, a fin-stabilized, electrically fired rocket. The problem for the Nebelwerfer units was the great amount of smoke produced during firing, marking the battery's position to the enemy. Requiring rapid displacement of the battery to avoid enemy artillery or airstrikes. The Nebelwerfer, in its many forms, was effective in dumping large numbers of artillery-sized shells onto a target quickly, and the noise the rockets made when fired was very intimidating to Allied troops. The question for the Germans was how to keep the Nebelwerfer batteries intact and the crews alive. The Germans solved this problem by developing the Panzerwerfer series of vehicles, basically armoured half-tracks mounting a 10-barreled Nebelwerfer. It first saw action on the Eastern Front in autumn 1943 and proved to be very effective. Soon the Allies would begin thinking about using the rocket in a similar manner, but with increased mobility and crew protection. One of the problems the United States Army faced in its war in Europe was to increase the firepower of assaulting US troops, particularly against the static defensive emplacements and bunkers the Germans increasingly used. Some sort of saturation weapon was necessary to cover a target area with artillery-sized shells in just a few seconds, but to also be much more mobile than any artillery battery could ever be. The answer was to combine the rocket and the tank. The Americans developed the T-34, a modified M4 Sherman tank mounting a special launcher over the turret. The launcher had 60 plastic tubes, firing 4.5-inch or 114mm M8 rockets. The T-34 was known as the Calliope. It had 36 tubes on the top and 2 groups of 12 below. Intriguingly, the entire rocket rack was connected to the Sherman turret's 75mm gun and could be pointed where the gun was directed. The fin-stabilized rockets had a maximum range of 4,200 yards, or 4 kilometers. Firing was triggered by cables running into the tank's turret through the commander's hatch. The crews nicknamed the vehicle the steam organ, as its pipes resembled those on the old Mississippi River steamboats. The one problem with the Calliope was the tank's main gun could not be fired when the rocket rack was attached to the turret, hampering the M4's ability to defend itself. Later versions used magnesium tubes, and the entire assemblage could be easily ejected from the vehicle, enabling normal tank operations. The question is, was the T-34 any good in action? The design was supposed to have been used for busting German shore bunkers initially, limited numbers having been manufactured in 1943 with a view to deploying them in the invasion of France in June 1944. But they were not used due to the vehicle's high center of gravity, dangerous for sea transportation. Later, during the drive into Germany, 30 M4s had the rocket apparatus installed, the plan being to use the Calliopes to assist an infantry division's advance against German static defenses on the Siegfried Line. But the German Ardennes offensive of December 1944 put paid to the plan, and the tanks lost their rockets and were used in the conventional role. However, in the final stages of the war, 5 US armored divisions gained Calliope-equipped tank battalions, seeing some service in the final battles across Germany. But one of the problems faced by Calliope crews in combat in Germany was the vehicle's very obvious profile. They were prized targets for German anti-tank assets and tended to be kept at the back of any advance. As with most of the other rocket-equipped World War II vehicles, Allied and Axis, the Calliope's effect was mostly psychological. The weird, unfamiliar screeching produced by the rockets when fired, and the wide impact area frightened German troops out of all proportion to its actual military effect on the battlefield. Later development led to the T-72, using fin-stabilized rockets. The T-72 had 60 shorter tubes loaded from the front, and the main gun could be fired when the rocket assembly was still attached to the tank. A further development was the T-40, later called the M17, commonly known as the whiz-bang. This ferocious beast launched 7.2-inch or 183mm demolition rockets, but had only 20 tubes.
This is what it looks like. The demolition rocket launcher, designated by the Ordnance Department as the T-40, mounted on an M4 medium tank.
This type saw very limited action in France and Italy. The whiz-bang was supposed to have been used in the Pacific to help overcome Japanese beach defenses in the Mariana Islands, as these tests in Florida demonstrated, but they did not see service. The British had their own rocket-armed Sherman variant going by the name Tulip. The Canadians had originated the idea by mounting 2 pairs of Royal Canadian Air Force 60-pound RP-3 aircraft rockets to the turrets of their Staghound armoured cars. Unsurprisingly, accuracy was poor and the system was never used in action. However, a British Coldstream Guards officer decided to try and imitate the same idea by placing the aerial rockets onto a Sherman tank. As a shock-and-awe weapon, the Tulip worked well. Having a couple of aerial rockets, normally fired from Typhoons, lobbed at them from tanks certainly ruined many a German's day. During the advance into the Netherlands, one Coldstream Guards troop used the Tulips to destroy an emplaced 88mm gun, and also caused the surrender of between 30 and 40 very shaken German infantrymen. One German officer actually complained that using aerial rockets launched from tanks was against the Geneva Convention. Or, as he should have said, that's just not cricket. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon, details in the description box below.